10-15 seconds or so for the stream to actually start. Hi, how are you doing? My name is Ken McNallen, and this is a book middle stream. So book middle streams are where I give a progress update on some book I'm reading. Tonight we're going to dive right in, less news, less other odds and ends, and just talk about the book, The Monsters of Templeton. I am about 1/3 of the way through the book, so it's a good time for an update. How's it going? Not my favorite thing that I've read in the last couple of years. So where to begin? Well, let's talk a little bit first about what's going on with the story. So like I said, I'm about 1/3 of the way in. That's about 120 pages. And in that space, we have jumped back and forth between the main story, which centers around Willie, the main character, Willie Templeton. The funny thing is I can't even remember if that's actually her name, because there's the Templeton family and the Uptons and all these different, historical families in this little town in New York. So Willie is the main character. I should also note that on all the middle streams, because I'm in the middle of the book and I'm going to be talking about characters and plot, they're all there will be spoilers. So if you really don't want to know anything about the book, maybe join another stream. But anyway, moving on. So Willie, the story starts out with Willie coming home, pregnant by her college professor and wanting to sort of crash at home. And I don't think she really wants to reconnect with her mom, but she's going back home to her mom's because that's where she can go. That's where she has a place to stay. And there are all these other elements to the story. Like the very first thing we see in the book is a old man in a boat running into the carcass of a dead, some sort of cryptozoological thing, a lake monster of sorts that has died. And the lake monster shows up throughout the story at different points because there's all the drama in Willie's life going on. There are historical flashbacks that tell us more about the town because the story is very much centered around the town. More on that later. And then we're seeing the monster towed into shore and put on display for the town and everyone oohing and ahhing over it. And then it being hauled up in a crane, put in like these little stages throughout all the way across these 120 pages. We get little glimpses of what's going on with the monster. And so far it doesn't really connect with anything else other than Willie sees it. At one point she goes up and touches it. You get the distinct impression that the author is going to connect some dots somewhere. I don't know that that's actually, I'm not super confident at this point that that's really going to happen. Why is that? Well, it kind of gets us to, let's keep talking about Willie a little bit. Characters. Let's move on to character. The plot, actually, let's finish plot. The plot is Willie comes home pregnant, has a rough sort of connection with her mom. We learn a little bit about the town. And then we also learn that Willie was told by her mom growing up that she could be the product of any one of 3 different hippie men who her mom had kind of open relationships with in San Francisco in the 60s. Her mom is an ex-hippie turned, as she puts it in the book, religious nut or religious zealot. Again, more on that later. So, so she comes home, she's pregnant, she's stressed, what do I do? So there's the monster thread. There's the what am I going to do with the baby thread. There's the I love this town and the town's history and how it all connects. And then there's this thing that gets thrown out where her mother says, so you were not the product of this free love period in my life. Your father is someone in town, but I can't tell you who it is. And there's one of the first biggest glaring problems with the plot to me, is that there's no really good compelling reason as to why her mom can't or won't tell her who it is. There's no tension at all in what is clearly meant to be one of the main questions in the book. And part of the problem there goes back to character. And that is that Willie, the main character, I have no interest in, personally. She's a flake. She's selfish. She's extraordinarily judgmental. How much of the book is dedicated to her looking at other people and making fun of them, and then literally looking in the mirror and thinking how pretty she is. So shallow character. Her mom is really no better. There are some side characters that are more interesting, and here's the thing: you don't have to love the character. You don't have to like them, but you should have some kind of stake in them, right? There should be something where even if they could be a completely awful person. It's a little, I think, obvious to say, but even if they're an awful person, like Hannibal Lecter, or one of my favorite antagonists of all time, the Joker, where you're not really liking them, but you are, but not in a not in a good or healthy way. You're interested in them. You want to know what they're going to do. And these characters are set up so that they're not the most interesting character around in the story. There are other characters that I think that the author has focused on briefly that are a little more interesting, a little better written. There's a group of old men who run around the town called the Running Buds. We see them fairly often. Willie naturally wonders if one of them is her father. And there's a chapter that's dedicated just to them, narrated from their point of view. And I like the author's writing in that one particular chapter especially well. There's nothing very revelatory about it. It's just a nice short bit of writing. It's fun to read. We find out about the characters a little bit. It's good. And then we're back to the story about this person who there's just nothing to take interest in, so far as I can see. I don't think this is a common complaint with the story. I can remember glancing at some reviews that were saying, look, by the time, there's the main thread about who's her real father. We're supposed to care about, what the answer to that question is. And you get to a certain point in the book and you're just like, I just don't care anymore. I'm already kind of there. I'm already at the point where I'm more interested in the book, not academically, but critically, because, and this is not good, but there are some books that you study because they impress you so much, and you want to take away the positive. You want to learn the techniques. This is one I'm continuing to read to say what went wrong. Like, what happened? Why at this point am I not invested in the character? Because I think the problem isn't as simple as, oh, she has flaws. Everyone has flaws. If your characters don't have flaws, they're not realistic. Are the flaws what are getting in the way? Is it flaws but an absence of any kind of other hook, any other kind of interest? Is it something more technical in the writing? Because the writing in this book is really, really uneven. Her voice switches fairly routinely from one style to another. Her most common mode of writing, personally, I do not find enjoyable at all. I picked up this book because, again, it was part of a little bit of research I was doing on authors' first books with magical realism, and I read the intro to the book, the section about the monster. I thought, well, this sounds interesting. What does the monster have to do with anything else that goes on in terms of human interest in the story? That is still maybe the only really interest. My only real point of interest in the overall story is figuring out how is she going to tie in the monster to this, if at all. And I'm just not convinced she is. But we'll see. Okay, so plot we've talked about just a little bit. We kind of know the main threads. It's what's going on with the monster. Will she keep the baby? Who's her dad? Is there anything else? It seems like there was at least one other thing. And I should note too is that the idea that there are so many different threads, I don't see as a problem. I don't feel like that part is getting in the way at all. Because whatever else I might be saying about her writing, she's keeping things clear. Like, I'm not confused about when we switch gears and now we're back in time. I'm not going, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on? Why am I reading this? I'm just kind of going with the flow, and it's pretty easy. Although, because there isn't a lot of interest in Willie or Vi, her mother, or any of the other characters in town, it is more difficult to keep track of who's who. And she provides visual aids throughout the book. I think may as well just show one here. Each chapter, and I think sometimes, well, not each chapter, most chapters, there will be some, can I move that to center? Yeah, there'll be some pictures, some explanatory text. And at the end of some, there's another one. So at the end of some chapters, we see something like this over on this side, where it is Willie's presumed family tree based on the research that she's done up to that point. And at first I took a look at them. At first I took a look and was like, oh, okay, we have this and that. And at this point, because the character's getting on my nerves so much, because I have no real interest in any of the main characters, I just don't bother. And it's not really a hindrance, because I can just kind of keep wading through the text, and it feels like there's nothing that I'm missing in not knowing the family's names or their relationships that's going to spoil any part of the plot later. It's going to like ruin one of the reveals or anything. I have a basic understanding of who's who, and that's sufficient. The rest just feels like overkill. The images in the book are another interesting thing. I think that this probably presumes sort of, oh, this will add some depth and some interest or just some texture to the story, because we actually have these like old-timey historical photos of the people in the story, and it for me, it absolutely does not. I think I would if I had an interest in the characters, or more of an interest in the town in the story, I might look at them and go, oh, this is fun. It's when you already love something, you tend to take an interest in the made-up stuff about it. Ask a Harry Potter fan if they would like to get a book that showed more details of Hogwarts history or something like that. Yeah. But if you didn't know Harry Potter and you're like, here's a book that is a sort of dry history of this made-up wizarding school, if you knew nothing else about the story, you'd be like, you might flip through. Maybe it's a coffee table book or something. Well, the pictures do nothing to draw me into the story. So yeah, it's not great. It's fairly rough. So writing style. Let's talk about writing style, structure, and other aspects of the overall technique, since we're already kind of doing that. The language, like I said, is so uneven. She goes from trying to be, it sounds harsh when I say it that way, but that's what it feels like, trying to be more poetic, to being really crass, and maybe doesn't convey a good sense of, doesn't seem self-aware of the gap between the two. Because, I mean, virtually every book I read is going to have something kind of, like maybe shocking or intentionally offensive. I read Fight Club. Yeah, I just talked about that. It's got lots of stuff in there. But like in Fight Club, you can be offended by the material, but it still integrates into the story. Here, it feels like someone who doesn't know how to cuss properly sometimes. It sounds like someone trying to be cutesy shocking somehow. So it feels really uneven. The fine details of the writing, the word choice and sentence structure and rhythm are not great. It doesn't read out loud very well to me. So why the heck am I still reading this? Why bother at all? And the truth is, I don't know if I will finish it. At this point, I'm continuing to read because, like I said, I do think there's more. As someone who is still figuring all this out from the get-go, from a very low level, I think there are a lot of valuable lessons for me to learn in terms of what went wrong with the writing, and is there any part of the story later where it can get salvaged? I don't think so. Like I said, I'm kind of curious to know how the monster ties into the overall story, but I don't know that I'm going to read the whole thing just to figure that out. So, not doing great so far, and that's okay. That happens. Oh, I should also mention there's an interesting sort of a comparison to be made. So one of the backstories involves a a white man having an affair with a black slave, which naturally is, it's one of those things that gets used so often. It's kind of like using, you can include something that is shocking or offensive in a story, again, but you kind of have to pay respects throughout the rest of the writing. I think you have to be very careful with those sorts of things because of how they can affect people. Well, I happen to be reading the scenes that were talking about that relationship and the young woman in this book, in the Monsters of Templeton, while I was also reading the introduction to Toni Morrison's Beloved. So it wasn't just that I was looking at this and going, this is kind of an indelicate, like you're just picking a sort of a standard shocking pattern off the shelf and throwing it into the story without giving it much thought. That's what it feels like. Not only was there that, but there was that in contrast and comparison to someone who wrote so much more deeply about the subject, even in just the first chapter of the book. And so it made this look even worse in terms of the author's maybe casual or careless use of the material. So, I think that's probably enough. I don't think there's a whole lot more to say. So why don't we go ahead and again, so am I going to keep reading? Yes, but almost out of more morbid curiosity at this point. I should have said this at the beginning. I don't even know if anyone's watching the stream at this point, but if you are and you're commenting, I do not have comments turned on at the moment, so I cannot see them, so I'll have to look later. On that note, so switching now from the Monsters of Templeton, we'll put all the sort of news updates at the end, so the people who look at the stream and the title, or look at the view on demand and see the title, you get the content that you see in the title right away. From here on, we'll do just a few updates. So recently, I did a manual typewriter ASMR stream. Went really well. I actually had more people watching along the way. Got some good feedback. It's had more views since, and it was fun. It was just fun to do. So I'll probably do more of those. The first was with my Olympia SM9 manual typewriter. I will next be trying out a Olivetti. I can't remember the model number, but anyway, it has every manual typewriter kind of has its own sound. And I also made the mistake last time of talking too much through parts of it, so we will not be doing that. And the next one will be just set at the typewriter, start the stream, and start typing. What else? I read the intro to Toni Morrison's Beloved. I'd read part of it before I went through and just started over, read the whole thing. So I'll probably be doing a book beginnings, stream on that one at some point, probably closer to when I'm actually going to read it, at which point I'll probably just read it again and then we just read an excerpt on the stream. What else have I read? Oh yeah, pull this up. So I talked about this before. I am looking to use folklore in various ways in my own stories. My daughter found this book at the local coffee shop. Book of Irish fairy and folk tales. Started reading it too, and really, really enjoyable. Irish folk stories have a very distinct and unusual structure to them. And they don't always follow. We're used to the idea of fairy tales being stories for children, and so you have sort of an innocent character of some kind and a conflict or a betrayal or some problem, and then a resolution, and we're so conditioned for and they lived happily ever after, right? Folk tales in general don't follow that pattern. They don't follow much of the same arc at all, but they do have a lot of patterns that are very persistent through them, and it's those patterns that you see that hint at this other world. Not just in Irish culture, not just in British or Icelandic, Nordic culture, but also in, ordered books, couple books on Malaysian folk stories, because they have some of the same patterns. Japanese folk stories have the same sort of patterns. I've been starting to look at African folk stories because, again, rules about hidden people, about food that is off limits to people who are not of those hidden people. Anyway, this has been a really good read so far. I still have to do some research to see if the stories are public domain, and if they are, they're short enough. I'll probably do a stream where I just read one, because I think they're enjoyable. And be a fun intro to talk about some of the folklore that I'm using in my own story. So that would be good. What else? Oh, just as on a passing note, little short things. So I've gone on a little bit about Don DeLillo. Don DeLillo. Hard for me to say his name. He is one of my favorite authors right now. And not surprisingly, like anyone who one person holds up as being great, another person is going to hold them up and say, I don't get it, you're all making it up, it's garbage. Well, I read some reviews recently by those people. I was curious. I was reading it. I was, basically tempting myself with the angry people on the internet. Do that sometimes. But anyway, read some reviews of his book that I'm currently reading, Underworld. Because Underworld is kind of a weird book in that, like everything I've seen from him so far, it does not have a traditional plot structure. And so one of the biggest complaints you'll see is, where's the plot? And some people, I love his prose. Absolutely adore it. I'm probably trying too hard, subconsciously, to model my own prose after his when I'm writing. Him and Cormac McCarthy, two of the stronger, and Neil Gaiman. Probably the three main influences in terms of how I envision, how I want my own prose to sound. But it was interesting to read opinions from people going, oh, come on, you don't need an adjective for every single noun. It was instructive because I hope I've done a good job tonight. As negative as my comments have been on this book, hopefully, going back and looking at this, I'll see that most of what I said was either rooted in here's the problematic thing, here's why, trying to keep it objective, or saying, I just don't like it. Because I expect some people are actually really going to like this book. They could really connect with the characters, and they could, it's. I think there are some things that are more objectively problematic in the book, like I was talking about, the use of a illicit affair with a slave as a sort of a cheap trope in the story. You could discuss that, but that's, I think, a lot easier to make the case that that's a problematic pattern in any story, any literature that uses that. But reading people's thoughts on Don DeLillo and as you find on the internet, the extent, all the people who act personally affronted at the fact that he wrote a book that was so not for them, was so not something that they would enjoy. Trying really hard to avoid that sort of approach. Even if I don't like something, I want to put it far enough away from me, not too far enough away from me that I can still see it. I can get some objectivity, I can analyze it, I can understand the mechanics of it, I can understand which parts do or don't connect with my own values, and that, much easier to learn things that way. You don't treat everything that you don't like it's intrinsically garbage or trash, right? Anyway, I think that's probably enough for tonight. I'm going to go try to write. I still have to do my first, actual stream where I, play a game or something, just relax, and do a status update on my own work. The brief version of the status update is, it's not going well. I am still stuck on very early material in the book. I'm writing every night. Haven't missed a day. But the amount of writing that is sticking, that is carrying forward, that is really adding to the story has been pretty minimal lately. So time to wrap this up. Time to go sit down and see if I can get that to work. Hope you are having a good day or evening whenever you're watching this. And thanks for watching. Take care. God bless. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye. And again, as always, we have to kind of count out the stream here. So I'm going to sit here awkwardly quiet for a moment while I wait for it to finish.